Let me describe how you believe you make important decisions. You gather information. You identify your options. You assess the likely consequences of each option. You weigh these consequences against your values and priorities. You select the option that best satisfies your values given your assessment of the consequences. This is the rational model of decision-making, and it is the model that virtually every educational and organizational system assumes underlies human choice. William James thought this description, while not entirely wrong, missed the most important features of how human decision-making actually works. And the subsequent century of research in psychology and behavioral economics has proven him right in almost every particular. James observed, with characteristically sharp attention to lived experience, that decisions rarely feel like the rational model describes. Most of the time, a choice does not arrive as the conclusion of a deliberate weighing process. It arrives as a felt certainty, a sense that one option is simply right, often before the conscious mind has had time to complete any systematic analysis. The analysis, when it occurs, often serves to justify a conclusion that has already been reached at a level below conscious deliberation. This is the dual process story that Daniel Kahneman would later make famous in Thinking, Fast and Slow, the distinction between rapid, intuitive, emotion-driven system 1 processing and slow, deliberate, analytic system 2 processing. But James had the essential framework a full century before Kahneman. He understood that the human mind operates on multiple levels simultaneously, that most of the cognitive work that shapes our choices happens below the threshold of conscious awareness, and that what we experience as deliberate rational decision-making is often a post hoc rationalization of conclusions already reached by faster, less visible processes. James was particularly interested in the role of emotion in decision-making. He rejected the Enlightenment ideal of pure reason untainted by feeling as both psychologically inaccurate and practically disastrous. Emotions, he argued, are not noise to be filtered out of the decision-making process. They are crucial information about what we value, what we fear, what we have learned from past experience, and how the current situation relates to our deepest commitments. The person who has successfully suppressed all emotional input from their decisions is not more rational. They are less informed. This insight connects directly to James's theory of emotion and to the somatic marker work of Antonio Damasio. Damasio's patients with damage to the prefrontal emotional interface could perform all the rational operations of decision-making. They could identify options, assess consequences, apply logical reasoning, but they could not actually make decisions. Without the emotional signals that normally orient the decision process, every option seemed equivalent, and deliberation could continue indefinitely without resolution. The rational machinery needs emotional fuel to run. James also identified a phenomenon that modern psychologists call overdeliberation or analysis paralysis, the observation that for certain kinds of decisions, particularly those involving complex subjective evaluations, too much deliberate analysis makes the decision worse. He describes situations where the first impression, the rapid holistic assessment, is more accurate than the considered conclusion reached after extended deliberation, because the analysis breaks the whole into parts and loses the integrative quality that made the first impression valid. This maps precisely onto research by A.P. Dijksterhuis and others on unconscious thought theory, the finding that for complex decisions with many variables, a period of distraction between the initial assessment and the final choice often leads to better outcomes than extended deliberate analysis. The unconscious processor, less constrained than the sequential conscious mind, integrates complex information more effectively. James's practical prescription for decision-making was pragmatic in the deepest sense. Test your beliefs by their consequences. Do not just ask, what is the right answer? Ask, what will happen if I choose this path? What kind of life does this decision lead toward? What does my body tell me when I imagine living with this choice? The integration of rational analysis with emotional intelligence, with imaginative projection into possible futures, with honest attention to what the body knows, this is what James would call wise decision-making. He would also counsel a certain courage of action, the willingness, once sufficient deliberation has occurred, to actually decide and act. Many people use deliberation as a substitute for action, as a way of feeling engaged with a problem while avoiding the risk of committing to a path. James had little patience for this. The best decision made now is usually far more valuable than the perfect decision never made. Decide. Act. Learn from what happens. Revise. This is the pragmatic method applied to the most personal level of human experience. James understood human judgment from the inside. Subscribe to the Psychology of William James and develop your own practical wisdom in the tradition he established.